Hi, this is Rachel. I just want to talk today about how much I am enjoying listening to Mormon Stories. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a podcast and also on YouTube, and it's basically an ex-Mormon who interviews a lot of what they call transitioning Mormons, those who are perhaps leaving the faith or going through some kind of faith crisis, if you like. And he does some very good interviews, and I've learned a lot from them. And I've actually developed quite a bit of empathy for Mormons and ex-Mormons, and having listened to their stories, because they are just so similar to Jehovah's Witnesses. Not the teachings are quite different, but the way the organisation works, the way it's structured, the kind of mind games, if you want to use that word, that are used to keep people under their control, to keep them in the church, to keep them busy in the church. They're quite identical, really, and the kinds of feelings that these ex-Mormons relate about their self-worth are very, very similar, almost identical to what a lot of ex-witnesses will say. A lot of Mormons are born in, just like with Jehovah's Witnesses, although from what I understand, the growth is kind of slowing down a lot, or possibly stagnating around the globe like it is with witnesses. And actually they have some of the same things happening with their churches. They have consolidation, their churches merging together. I think they call them wards. I'm not all up with their terminology yet, stakes and wards, and I'm not really quite sure what they all are, whether they are like circuits and congregations, but anyway, their numbers are dwindling as well. From the interviews that I've listened to so far, it seems that most of them have had good experiences as children growing up in the Mormon church, because it's very family orientated. They have a lot of groups and activities that are tailored for young ones, for teenagers, for men, for women. There's tons of different groups, it seems. They do fun activities, go on camps, although it seems that it's more the boys that get to do that sort of thing. So they keep very busy with these very social activities within the church, and that was kind of fun for the kids growing up, and they form a good social network, good friends, and in fact they're quite busy, so busy with these activities that they don't really have time to spend much time with people outside the church. So with witnesses, most ex-witnesses that you talk to don't really have very nice recollections of their childhood as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Where the Mormons are kind of spending a lot of their time being busy in activities inside the church, Jehovah's Witnesses also have, they're busy with the organisation, attending meetings and preparing for field service, but all their meetings are geared up towards serving in the ministry. And so the weekend would roll around and witness children wouldn't get to watch cartoons on TV like most of their peers. They'd be taken door to door with mum and dad, if mum and dad are witnesses. Often, they'd be mortified about meeting someone they knew from school. So there's a lot of embarrassment, shame and fear associated with being a witness child. And of course, witness children, they do live with a lot of fear. Even the children's publications put out by the Watchtower Society talk about Armageddon and wicked people being destroyed. And of course, children will, look at their school friends and their teachers and envisage them falling into big cracks in the earth, or being hit by balls of fire raining down from the sky from Jehovah at Armageddon. So they live with a certain amount of fear. And there aren't really fun activities for witness children, at least not arranged by the organisation itself. Individual witnesses or families might organise some kind of get-together, like a soccer match or a picnic at the park or something like that. But oftentimes they're few and far between. So, and it would always be after the ministry. The ministry comes first, the door-to-door. So that was one striking difference. I found that, Mormons had positive memories of their childhoods. It's often not till they're older and they start thinking for themselves and start questioning some of the doctrines. And like with witnesses, questioning of the prophets or the men in the lead is not a good thing, is not permitted. So just like a witness can be brought in before a judicial committee on a charge of apostasy if they perhaps indicate that they don't have the full confidence in the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, or are critical of a teaching or some kind of direction that the governing body are taking, then they can end up being disfellowshipped. Well, the same thing happens with Mormons if they question the prophets. And when they come before their judicial meeting, which is actually called a disciplinary council, and in these councils, they're not only faced by 3 older men in the congregation, they may have a whole room full of men, which you can imagine would be an extremely intimidating situation to be in. But they are faced with the loyalty questions. Do they believe that it's the only true church? Because Mormons believe that their religion is the only true Christian faith on earth today. And so they're asked that, and of course if they say no, then they're not really to be considered a Mormon anymore, and they can be disfellowshipped. And they do actually use that word disfellowshipped. And I've heard them use the word excommunication as well, so whether they just use these interchangeably, I don't know. But it does seem, from what I've heard, that these disciplinary councils do seem to give a bit more time to the person to explain themselves. Because I've heard some recordings too of these kinds of meetings, and they do sound a little more reasonable than what I've heard of judicial committees made up of 3 elders with Jehovah's Witnesses. But I guess it's all dependent on the particular individuals. Like with Jehovah's Witness elders, you get some that are very harsh and pharisaical and just go by the book, go by the letter of the law, and seem to forget about mercy. Where there are others that are the opposite, who would rather be more merciful than judgmental. And of course you get elders that don't even want to be in a judicial committee at all. They don't want to be judging anybody, especially if it means it's going to separate them from their families and friends. Imagine having that on your conscience, as a lot of elders must do, the good ones anyway. So, and I also, even though it seems that the shunning, with Jehovah's Witnesses, the shunning is mandated by the organisation, and we've got it in print, and we've heard it at talks, not to even respond to emails or phone calls or texts from disfellowshipped family members. So the shunning is very extreme with Jehovah's Witnesses, but it just seems to be a little more flexible, a bit more lax with the Mormons. It seems that though you are excluded from certain privileges within the church, like I think you can't wear your special underwear anymore, yay, and you can't serve in different positions in the church, of course, but you could still expect to be invited to a family get-together. It may be that some of the relatives might not feel inclined to talk to them so much because of their stand either against the church, or perhaps they're doing something that's not approved of by the church, hence they've been disfellowshipped. But it seems that there can still be some communication existing there. And I guess with witnesses, it depends on the individuals too, because we know that many Jehovah's Witnesses disobey those direct instructions from the governing body to shun their family members. And basically they turn it around on them and say, if you don't shun them, then they might not come back to Jehovah, so it's all your fault, It's just ridiculous. So I wanted to also mention that what came out quite strongly is that the Mormons do have a very high moral standard within their organisation, just like the witnesses would claim. And I'm sure, that's what is taught, like no sex before marriage, that sort of thing. But I guess individuals on many occasions fail, don't they? Something else that I noticed too that ex-Mormons related was the deep feelings of worthlessness, not being worthy, being unhappy in their service, because like the young men are strongly encouraged to do the 2-year missionary stint, for which they go to their missionary training centre first of all, and they have to be 21 to do that, but they're very young still, and they're kind of like dropped in the deep end. It seems like a lot of them would be kind of terrified about doing it. They've probably been living at home, young person, perhaps fairly sheltered from the world, and then they're being sent overseas to proselytize. And some of them have just expressed in their interviews how terrified they were of that, and how they'd do all the witness tricks to avoid talking to people, or just go and hang out at the library, but they, I think, I don't know if they have, I think they're fairly pressured to perform, they have quotas and things like that, I believe, so, although I've been listening to a lot of Scientology stuff too, and they definitely had quotas too, the ones that were high up in the Scientology Sea Org. But so there's this pressure on to perform, and of course these young boys going off on their mission would make their families very proud. And if for some reason they cut their 2 years short and came home, it would be a cause of deep shame. It's like, you hear about regular pioneers in Jehovah's Witnesses organisation that, they're held up in high esteem in the congregation, and then when for some reason they have to stop pioneering, they feel very like they've let everyone down, very disappointed in themselves, when they've given so much. They shouldn't feel like that, but that feeling that they have, and I guess that, burning out, and I can think of a sister right now who burnt out as a regular pioneer, and I guess feeling like others perhaps don't understand what they're going through would be very frustrating. But there's a deep feeling of worthlessness, and not measuring up, and never doing enough, and not getting it right enough, that pervades the Mormons organisation, just like with the witnesses. So that's very sad. Not everybody feels like that, but a great deal of people do, I know. And with witnesses, it seems with every talk, at the convention, there's always this pressure to do more. Like they bring out some pioneer with no arms or legs in a wheelchair, and basically say, if this person can regular pioneer, then any one of you can, and it just makes you feel riddled with guilt, and then perhaps angry that you feel guilty, and it's just this all these negative emotions spiraling around in your head. So it's not a good way to live. Anyway, I can't think of, I suppose, the common, basically you really need to listen for yourselves to the Mormon Stories, it's called. It's a man called John Dallin, who's an ex-Mormon who does these interviews. And he spends about 2 hours with each person at least, so you get quite an in-depth look at their story, and it's very interesting. And there's a lot of very helpful information that is so relatable to witnesses who are perhaps trying to fade. I just listened to a podcast just the other day talking about how ones can remain in the church as a Mormon when they don't believe. And it's the same predicament that witnesses have when they perhaps can't leave because they've got family there and they want to wake them up. So some very useful tips there, and the kind of scenarios, the situations that these fading or these non-believing but staying in Mormons have are just so the same as what fading witnesses have. You know, how do the brothers ward off phone calls from the elders, wanting them to take on extra assignments or positions? And there are a lot of positions to be taken up in the Mormon church with all these different activities that they have in different groups and meetings and stuff. So I do encourage you to go and have a listen to it, and if any Mormons are watching this, please correct me on anything I've said that's wrong. I'm still learning about your organisation, but I know I feel a lot more empathy for Mormons, and I'm much more inclined to speak to them now when I see them on the street, which I do occasionally. Yeah, so anyway, that's it for now. Bye.